Yes. So I'd like to build a little bit on what Sharon was talking about as far as solar and its utilization. One of the things that we're seeing is there's different markets that are sort of developing at different rates. What really started for us was the residential market, because the people who sort of knew that they wanted to do something, there were some good incentives and they were able to take advantage of that. But what we've seen over the last couple of years is commercial businesses getting much more into doing solar, and in particular nonprofits and municipalities. So we've been trying to look at what it takes to make some of these larger, more comprehensive projects work. And nearly every time it comes down to finance. How do you pay for these systems? Particularly because in a lot of cases, many of the incentives that are being used are tax incentives. So they're tax breaks that a nonprofit can't necessarily take advantage of. So what we've been seeing is that different organizations like educational organizations, municipalities, other nonprofits have found other means of funding their systems through things like grants through the state of Pennsylvania. Later on, Mario Leone's going to be here talking about Monaca Borough, and they got a very nice sized PETA grant from the state that enabled them to do a solar panel system, which my company just happened to have installed. But beyond that, there are things like low interest loans that are available through organizations like the Sustainable Energy Funds, of which there are a couple here in the state. And then there's also some, there's Penvest, for example, which does a lot of financing for municipalities. And also there are opportunities to do third-party financing. The trick with the third-party financing, what's referred to as a power purchase agreement, oftentimes has to do with the amount of money that's paid for the energy. So if you don't have a high enough electric rate, it's tough to make the economics of that work. When you do that, you really have to take sort of a different standard of investment and return on investment than you might for, say, commercial business or even for homeowners. Typically, commercial business is looking for like a 3 to 5 year payback. Homeowners who are likely to be in their homes for a couple of decades, well, 10 to 15 years is a reasonable amount of time, especially given that these solar panel systems tend to last 25 to 35 years. So you're still going to maybe double your investment over the life of that system. With the nonprofits and the municipals, you really have to look at basically breaking even in terms of having a system that could take 20 to 25 years to pay back, based on the fact that you can't take advantage of those tax incentives. So it's what I refer to as the green break-even principle of investment, where if you can do something in a green way, even though you may not make a lot of extra money at it or save a lot of money through it, it's sort of the more environmentally responsible way to do it. And so that's really the measure of the yardstick of investment that you have to apply to a lot of those projects. What's improved that somewhat, as I mentioned earlier, is the ability to do some third-party financing. If you're interested in pursuing that, though, a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, you have to have an adequate energy rate to have it make sense, to have the numbers work out. Because in essence, what you're doing is you're leasing the system long-term from an investor who's paying for the cost of it up front. So you're basically buying the energy from that investor. So you have to have a large enough project that there's enough scale of what you're doing. And based on that, you have to have a large enough consumption of energy. In the case of Monaca Borough, they have a large water reservoir that is powered by the solar system that we built for them. And Mario will be talking a little bit more about that this afternoon. But that's really the key to it, is having the scale, having the adequate energy rates, and then setting up the financial structure to make that work, which generally involves an investor, and you have to have a bank or some sort of financial entity that's going to handle the transactions over a long term, over like 20 years. So those are sort of the key components of that. A couple other things I'll just mention real quick. One is that people talk about doing community solar, and that's sort of one of the funding strategies that's on the horizon. Again, it's a little bit difficult to do. The legislation that's required to make it work isn't really being supported here in the state of Pennsylvania yet, but it is in other locations, so we're looking forward to that coming in the future. And just in terms of workforce development, I will say the EIS has been sort of blessed with a lot of business interest in the last couple of years, so we've actually expanded our workforce, our installers, by 50% in the last 6 months, so we're feeling pretty good about that. So with that, I'll be glad to answer questions for the panel, and I'll pass this along to the next person. How's that?
Okay, thank you.